I don't really know why I did it, honestly. I just reacted. I struck, and then the next thing I know, his ear was just laying there on the ground. Jesus, calmly, of course, just reached down and picked it up, just put it back on his head, and it was like nothing had ever happened. And then they took him away. I was afraid. We were all afraid. But still, I had to know. I had to follow. I had to see what was going to happen.
I had to go. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't stay with the apostles. I had to go see what was going on.
And then they took him away. I was afraid. We were all afraid. But still, I had to know. I had to follow. I had to see what was going to happen to him and where they were going to take him. So John and I, we followed.
It was happening. It happened so fast. I could barely believe it. The beatings, the thorns, the lies from the false witnesses. It was spinning out of control. It was so chaotic.
I remember the first time I saw him. I had heard that he could heal people who were sick and possessed even had been healed. So I thought maybe he could heal me too. And then it happened. He did it. I was broken, and then I wasn't. He healed me. And with Martha and some others, and I was so grateful to him. I loved him.
They didn't know that I followed him, that I loved him as they did. I was wealthy, true. I had influence, true. But I was also afraid. What if they had found out? What if my peers, the Jews, those in the Sanhedrin, had found out? I couldn't risk it. I just couldn't. They could have ruined me. And so I followed from afar, in secret, in fear of them, always in fear. I wanted to tell everyone. I wanted to tell them what I know about Jesus and who he was. But I did not. I could not bring myself to do it. I had too much to lose. Was I concerned more with my wealth than his kingdom? Was I more concerned with my status? All good questions. I've asked myself those so many times.
Mary Magdalene, I remember him delivering me of 7 demons. I remember him speaking into the tomb and calling forth my dead brother, Lazarus. I remember the joy and the hope that we had. I remember Jesus. And now here is my Jesus, taken before the high priest.
And I was recognized, of course, once and then twice. And I denied that I was with him. And then the third time, and I denied that I'd even ever known him. And I cursed just to prove my point. And then the cock crowed. And I saw him. He was looking right at me. And at that moment I remembered what he had told me. How could I? It had just been a few hours before that he had told me that I would deny him 3 times before the cock would crow, but I was so sure I would never do that. But I did. He was right. He knew. And then the tears came. And I couldn't stop them. I couldn't control them. So I did the only thing I could think to do at that moment. I just ran.
The priests and the Pharisees had taken him before the Sanhedrin and had found him guilty. I wondered, guilty of what? And it only got worse. Like the others that were there, I just could not believe it.
I knew who he was. I knew he had come to establish the kingdom of God. But still, But then the trial happened, and I knew that they had paid those witnesses, that anything that they said against him was a lie. I know how they work. I knew that they hated him, but I did nothing. Why? Why didn't I do something? Sure, I didn't consent to his death, but I could have done more.
He had healed me. I served him. I loved him. And now I could do nothing. It seemed as if no one could. Like this was destined to happen. Like it was ordained.
Even Pilate tried to stop it, but the crowd was incited by the Sadducees and the priests. They had always hated him, and this was their chance to stop his ministry.
All I could do was stand and watch and cry and hear the shouts. And I had a moment where I thought they were going to release him because there was no fault found in him. Yet the crowd cried louder, "Give us Barabbas!" And they began to cry, "Crucify! Crucify!"
They took him and beat him and mocked him. It was unbearable. The robe and the crown of thorns, was all that really necessary? Did they really need to mock him? But they did, mercilessly.
First Pilate, then Herod, then Pilate again. This was happening. He was going to die.
And I thought that maybe Herod would intervene, but no. Back to Pilate, he said. And the crowd that had cheered him, they praised him, and now they wanted him dead. We followed, Mary and I, and we stayed as close to him as we could, and we saw him suffer. We saw the pain and the agony. I mean, it was so evident on his face. But you know, there was something else there too. There was a strength, a calm. It was like he knew. Like it was his choice and not theirs.
When they began to drive the nails, it was too much to watch. But even the sound eventually became too much for me to hear. Hearing the nails being drove into his hand, it hurt.
I tried to tune out the beating of the nails as they were hammering my Jesus to the cross.
I couldn't describe the feeling of hearing my Lord or seeing him there. He was so weak. He was humiliated. They took his clothes. They stripped him naked. And just then they started mocking him. And they pierced his side. And he spoke. He spoke to me.
I cried. I cried horrible and terrible tears. I cried because he suffered so much.
I watched, as did the others, in shock. I needed to say something, do something, but instead, I just watched. The cruelty of it all, the injustice of it all. Like a common criminal, they hung him between two thieves. And then he died.
He died there. And just as quickly as it begun, it was over.
He was gone. It happened so fast, but he was really gone. I don't understand it. We had planned for things. We had planned for a ministry, and then it was over.
And his body just hung there, limp, lifeless, broken. I couldn't leave him there like that. I just couldn't. I knew what they would say, what they would know, but I had to get him down. I was not going to let him stand any longer on that cross like one accursed. I knew Pilate would listen, so I went to him and I asked him, and he agreed. So I took care of his body, me and Nicodemus.
And then oh, how the days were so slow. We waited until the end of the Sabbath, and then I got my spices and my ointment together because I was going to go and minister to my Jesus who had ministered to me. And when I got to the tomb, the stone had been rolled away, and I looked into the tomb and I did not see Jesus, but there were two angels, and they said, "Why are you crying?" And I turned and I looked and I saw a man that I thought was the gardener. And I said, "I'm crying because where is my Jesus? Who has done this thing? Who has taken him? Where have they taken Jesus?" And then, who I thought was the gardener spoke. Oh, what a beautiful sound it was. He said, "Mary." He called my name. And as soon as I heard his voice, as soon as he called my name, I knew that my Jesus was before me once again. And I went to hug and embrace him, but I was stopped. But he told me, "Mary, go and find Peter and my disciples and tell them to meet me in Galilee."
When I came to myself, I really didn't know what to do. So I just went to find my friends, my brothers. Next thing you know, it had been 3 days. And we were sitting there in the room together, and Mary came in. She was excited. She said, "He's gone. He's not there." We, of course, didn't know what she meant. She said that an angel had told her that he had risen.
She told us, but it couldn't be.
I didn't believe her. I don't think anybody really did. But still, I had to know. I had to see for myself. So I jumped up and I ran again. This time, not away from Jesus, but to where I thought he was.
Peter was out the door first, but I had to see him. I had to catch up.
John was faster. He outran me. And when I got to the tomb, he was standing there, and I could see the stone was rolled away from the mouth of the cave.
The stone was moved, and he was gone. Our Lord, who had died, had risen again.
He was standing on the outside looking in, but I couldn't stay outside. I had to go in. I wanted to see. And so I ran into the cave, and I saw, and he was not there. The linens were there, folded neatly. But his body, he was gone.
I heard the news then, 3 days later. The body was gone. Someone had taken it, they said. But as time would tell, that was not so. I had watched, I had waited, and now his kingdom was at hand. He would reign forever. He was alive, and I was not afraid.
I didn't know what to think. Galilee. Mary had said that the angel had told her he would meet us in Galilee. We had to go to Galilee. And so we did.
We sat there, everyone but Thomas, some believing, some questioning, some just not sure.
And as we sat in that room in Galilee, eating, not really, waiting and wondering, not all of us really convinced yet, something happened.
He appeared. Jesus stood in front of us. He was really there. We saw that it was him, and it was all true.
I mean, he wasn't there, and then he was there. He just appeared from nowhere. Of course, the room went crazy, and everyone was shouting at him and trying to get to him, but still, I wondered. But then he showed us. He showed us his hands. He showed us his side. And then I knew.
And the agony I felt as I watched him die, that pain of seeing my Lord being crucified and him being beaten and humiliated, all of a sudden in that single moment, it was over. And there was a joy and a peace that overcame me because he had done it. Those things that he said were true.
I knew that it was him, that he had risen. He had risen from the grave. I can't tell you how much joy and relief I had in that moment. Because then I knew and I understood it was going to be okay. Everything was going to be okay because Jesus was still with us.